Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and today I thought I would talk about some of my favourite books from the last 4 years. So, today is actually my 4-year anniversary on Booktube. As of today, I have been on Booktube for 4 years, which is really weird because 4 years is quite a long time. And I thought, in honour of having been on Booktube for 4 years, I would make a video that I've seen going around on Booktube a little bit, which I have been really enjoying on other people's channels. And this is a video where people go back through their favourites videos from the last few years and talk about which books they still consider favourite. So I've seen this video done on Jen Campbell's channel and Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings and Olivia Pope, and I will link their videos down below where they did this. And basically they looked back on all of their favourites videos, or sort of favourite books of the year videos since they started Booktube, and talked about what had stayed with them and what was still their favourites, and came up with a list of their favourite books from the last few years. So as I said, I've now been on Booktube for 4 years, so I have made 4 favourite books of the year videos since I've been on Booktube, one in 2015, one in 2016, one in 2017, one in 2018, and then there are a few books like in my head that I know will probably be on my favourite books of 2019 list. So I thought I would talk about my favourite books in the last 4.5 years. I can't remember which of my favourite books from 2015 I read before joining Booktube, so I thought I would just kind of include them all. But anyway, I think this will probably be quite a long video, and what I'm going to do is talk through my favourite books of the year videos from 2015 until 2018, and a few books that I know I loved so far in 2019, and talk about which of those kind of have stayed with me and are still favourites. So I had my laptop out in front of me with lists of those books that got on my favourite books of the year videos for the last 4 years, and I think I'll just talk through them. I'm not going to talk in depth about what each of the books are about, because I'm going to mention like 50 books in this video, more than 50 books, probably like 80 books I'm going to mention the names of in this video. I don't even think I'm going to be able to link them all down below in the description because I think I'll run out of space on YouTube. So the only ones I'm going to talk about in depth are the books that I'm like, at the end, these have definitely stayed with me. This is my list of my favourite books from the last few years. So, in 2015, my favourite books of the year in reverse order were Dickens at Christmas, which was a collection of Dickens stuff from Christmas, A Tale from the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, Polomene's Gate by Jonathan Stroud, A Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, The Emerys by Richard O'Brien, The Rental Heart and Other Fairy Tales by Kirsty Logan, How to Be Both by Ali Smith, Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter, The Lake by Banani Oshiboto, The Charms by Anna Smale, A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, Lady Susan by Jane Austen, Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell, Emerald City by Jennifer Egan, and Kitchen by Banani Oshiboto. Now, I'm definitely not going to include Dickens at Christmas in the list because it's a like selection of lots of his work, so it doesn't really necessarily count as like a full thing. It's just something slightly different. A Tale of the Time Being I really liked. I don't think it stayed with me hugely. I don't think it's like a forever favourite. Ptolemy's Gate by Jonathan Stroud is the 3rd book in the Bartimaeus trilogy. I love the Bartimaeus trilogy. The Bartimaeus trilogy as a whole is a favourite, but I'm not sure whether like this individual book was. I feel like the 2nd book was my favourite in the series, so we'll say that as a maybe. A Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare I really enjoy, but it's not an all-time favourite. It hasn't stayed with me super amount. The Emerys by Richard O'Brien though, which is a poetry collection, that's definitely one that has stayed with me quite a lot, and quite a lot more than some of the other things later on in this list. I think partly because it has one of my favourite poems in it, Le Man, and even if I don't remember the other poems in that collection, I love that poem a lot, and it's one of my favourite poems ever. The Rental Heart and Other Fairy Tales I really liked, but I don't think it stayed with me that much. I don't remember that many of the short stories from it. How to Be Both by Ali Smith I really liked, but the stuff I've read by Ali Smith since I haven't liked as much, so I feel like that slightly tarnished it in my mind. Grief is the Thing with Feathers I really liked, but again, I don't think it's an all-time favourite. The Lake by Banani Oshiboto probably is an all-time favourite, although Kitchen by Banani Oshiboto, which is the last book on this series, is more of an all-time favourite, if you see what I mean. The Chimes by Anna Smale is an all-time favourite for me. It's an absolutely brilliant book and one I would love to reread, and one that has stayed with me a lot considering that I read it a few years ago. And it's interesting, like A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan I've put above The Chimes on this list, but The Chimes has stayed with me more than A Visit from the Goon Squad. I love A Visit from the Goon Squad, but it's not my favourite thing by Jennifer Egan. While I really love it, I feel like there are flaws with it, and I feel like, I can't remember if I gave it 4 or 5 stars when I read it, but I feel like on reflection it's a 4-star rather than a 5-star book. Lady Susan by Jane Austen is absolutely an eternal forever favourite, as is Station 11, as is Mary Barton, and as is Emerald City, and as is Kitchen by Banani Oshiboto. So 2015 was a good year. Interestingly as well, Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel and Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, like Banana Yoshimoto and Emily St. John Mandel are two of my favourite living authors, and these were the first books I read by those authors, so those two definitely hold their place in my favourites. So, on to 2016, we have, in reverse order, Desperate Remedies by Thomas Hardy, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, Revenge by Yoko Ogawa, The Hand of Ethelberta by Thomas Hardy, Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson, The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss and The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, Even the Dogs by John McGregor, The Egoist by George Meredith, New Grove Street by George Gissing, The Not Dead and the Saved by Kate Clancy, The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, Barsh of the Towers by Anthony Trollope, The Half Sisters by Geraldine Dewsbury, Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel, So Many Ways to Begin by John McGregor, The Lola Quartet by Emily St. John Mandel, and The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. Interestingly, Desperate Remedies is the lowest thing on this list, but actually one of the books on here that has stayed with me the best, and I love it a lot, and it's one of my favourite Thomas Hardy, so that definitely I think is an all-time favourite. Definitely more so than The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I liked but wouldn't stay with me forever. Revenge by Yoko Ogawa is fantastic. I do really love that. Let's say that's a maybe. The Hand of Ethelberta I like, but there are better Thomas Hardy books, such as Desperate Remedies, and it's weird that it appears below this on this list. Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day I love, but I don't think it's an all-time favourite one for me. Same with The Ocean at the End of the Lane, though I do really like it. The Wise Man's Fear I wouldn't say is an all-time favourite for me, but The Name of the Wind I would. And I love the series as a whole, but by which I mean I love those two books, and I'm really excited for the third one, whenever it may finally appear. But The Name of the Wind is, I think, a better book than The Wise Man's Fear, and there's one section of The Wise Man's Fear that I don't love, whereas I love everything about The Name of the Wind, I think. I think The Name of the Wind is definitely like my favourite fantasy book of all time. Even the Dogs by John McGregor I love, but I'm not gonna say it's an all-time favourite. It's not my favourite John McGregor, though I love it. There are 3 John McGregor books I love more than that, so I feel like therefore, although John McGregor is one of my favourite authors, even the Dogs doesn't necessarily count as like my favourite favourites. The Egoist by George Meredith, though, I would absolutely put on a list of my favourite books of all time. New Grove Street, would I? I would put George Gissing's The Netherworld on a list of my favourite books of all time, which I read before joining Booktube. I'm going to say New Grove Street maybe, but I'm not sure. It's interesting, The Egoist is below New Grove Street here, but I would say I love The Egoist more. The Not Dead and the Saved by Kate Clancy is a short story collection. I love it, but I don't remember it that well, and I feel like that is not something that would belong on my favourite books of all time, whereas The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy and We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson would. Barchester Towers is a hard one, because I love it, but it's not my favourite book in the Barchester Chronicles, which is coming up later. But then, like, if I were to rank my favourite Trollope books, while it wouldn't be in the top 3, it might well be the 4th one, so let's say maybe. There's going to be a lot. I'm going to end up with too many books on this list. The Half Sisters by Geraldine Dewsbury is absolutely a favourite book of all time. Last Night in Montreal, I'm going to say no, although I love it a lot, partly just because we're about to get on to more Emily St. John Mandel that would make that list. So Many Ways to Begin by John McGregor, I don't think would make the list of favourite books of all time. I love it, but Reservoir 13 and If Nobody Speaks of Remarkable Things are my 2 favourite John McGregor books, and I feel like they both belong on a list of like my favourite books ever, whereas I'm not sure So Many Ways to Begin does. But The Lola Quartet by Emily St. John Mandel absolutely does. But interestingly, my favourite book of the year from 2016, The Luminaries, I don't think belongs on a list of my favourite books of all time. I loved it and I really, really enjoyed it, but like, on reflection, I love The Lola Quartet so much more, and I remember The Lola Quartet so much better, and I don't remember The Luminaries that well, and I did really enjoy it when I read it, and I think one of the reasons why it ended up being my favourite book of the year in 2016 was because it's a really long book. It took me a month to read it, and I read it like in December, so it was really, really fresh in my mind. But while I do love it, I don't think it stayed with me as much as some of the other books on that list has, which is really interesting because obviously I declared it my favourite book of the year in 2016, and now I would say I don't love it as much as Desperate Remedies by Thomas Hardy, which was the lowest position in my favourite books of the year for that year. So isn't it interesting how books stay with you and don't? So interesting. Right, on to 2017. In reverse order, we have Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, Queen Eleanor and Fair Rosamond by Margaret Oliphant, A Start in Life by Anita Bruckner, Imperium and Lustrum by Robert Harris, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell, Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, Elegant Etiquette in the 19th Century by Mallory James, When We Were Orphans by Kazu Ishiguro, Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell, The Girl with the Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, In the Country by Mia Alvar, The Singer's Gun by Emily St. John Mandel, Reservoir 13 by John McGregor, The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope, Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan, Family Parsonage by Anthony Trollope, The Odd Women by George Gissing, Last Fling by Sue G, A Dark Night's Work by Elizabeth Gaskell, Smoked Meat by Rowena MacDonald, and The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. Lots of great books in 2017, a lot of very good short story collection. Fingersmith I love, but it's not my favourite Sarah Waters. It wouldn't make a list of my favourite books of all time. Nor would Queen Eleanor and Fair Rosamond by Margaret Oliphant, nor would A Start in Life by Anita Bruckner. So the Cicero series as a whole would definitely be on my list of like favourite works of literature of all time, but I don't know if I could like pick one individual book to be there, and if I could, would it be the last one rather than the first two? I don't know. We'll put that as a maybe. The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell, I'm going to say not on my list of favourite books of all time, though I feel like if I were to make a list of my favourite individual short stories of all time, the second story in that book, Jacob, would probably be there. Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, I'm going to say no, because I'm sure there's another Agatha Christie from 2018 that I would put on the list that is even better and more incredible. Elegant Etiquette in the 19th Century by Mallow Drames I love, but I don't think I'm going to include any non-fiction books on my list of favourite books of all time because I feel like that's very hard to judge, so we're gonna stick to fiction for now. When We Were Orphans by Kazuo Ishiguro I think would get on that list. I love Ishiguro a lot, it's a brilliant novel. Sylvia Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell, I'm going to say no because there are Elizabeth Gaskell novels that mean more to me. Girl of the Poloing by Tracy Chevalier, let's say maybe, I'm not sure, I can't decide. In the Country by Mia Alvar, I love a lot, but I think probably not. Like, short story collections, I think it's really hard because there are some stories in this which have stayed with me a lot, but some that have less. The Singer's Gun by Emily St. John Mandel, let's say no. I think that's my least favourite of Emily St. John Mandel's novels, although they're all amazing, so, you know, there's not much in it. Reservoir 13 by John McGregor Wood, I love that book a lot. The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope, kind of yes, but then kind of like, I don't know, then I said Barchester wasn't, and I feel like I love them both. I don't know, I really love Anthony Trollope. Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan, I'm going to say no. Friendly Parsonage by Anthony Trollope, we're going to say maybe, but this list is going to end up like half Anthony Trollope at this rate. The Odd Women by George Gissing would definitely be on the list of my favourite books of all time. Last Fling by Sue G, maybe. I don't know, that's another one where like the short story in there called Last Fling would be on a list of my favourite short stories of all time, but I'm not sure whether the collection as a whole would be on my list of favourite short like books of all time. A Dark Night's Work by Elizabeth Gaskell is definitely a favourite for life. Smoked Meat by Rowena MacDonald is definitely a favourite for life. That is possibly my favourite short story collection ever, maybe tied with Emerald City, which I mentioned earlier. And then The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope, which is one of my favourite books ever, is definitely on that list. Now we're getting on to 2018. I said this would be a long video. I feel like it's just me saying book titles, but you know, I enjoyed it when other people did it, so I'm hoping some of you will enjoy it for me. We have, in reverse order, The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher by Kate Summerscale, Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, What Matters in Jane Austen by Joan Mullen, An Unrestored Woman by Shobha Rao, Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, In the Blink of an Eye by Ali Bacon, Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, East Lynne by Ellen Wood, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope, Days Without End by Sebastian Barry, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, A Place Called Winter by Patrick Gale, Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, Mrs. Gaskell and Me by Nell Stevens, The Miniaturess by Jessie Burton, Radiance by Catherine M. Valente, Maurice by Ian Forster, Olive by Diana Mullet-Craik, and The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley. So, interestingly, looking down this list, I think because I only made it 6 months ago, I feel like the ones at the top are definitely the ones that have stayed with me the most because it's only been 6 months since I made this, whereas I feel like in the previous years there were quite a lot of books lower down the list that had stayed with me more. So it'd be interesting to see in 2 years' time. I might not feel the same about this list, but I'll skip over the first three: The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher, Jane Austen at Home, and What Matters in Jane Austen, because they're all non-fiction. An Unrestored Woman by Shobha Rao I really love, but it's not like a forever favourite that I'm going to go back to tons. Same with Around the World in 80 Days, same with In the Blink of an Eye, though it is a really fantastic historical fiction book and one that I'd really recommend. I have like a question mark by Tipping the Velvet. Sarah Waters is one of my favourite authors, but I feel like she's one of those authors where I love her work as a whole more than I love like any individual book, so I don't know. East Lynne by Ellen Wood I think would definitely be on the list of my favourite books of all time, assuming it were quite a long list, as would And Then There Were None. Can You Forgive Her? I'm going to say no, I think because I just don't love it as much as I love lots of books in the Barchester Chronicles and some of his standalones. Days That End by Sebastian Barry was incredible, I'm going to say maybe. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier I think maybe. A Place Called Winter, I'm going to say yes, I love that book a lot. Everything I Never Told You, let's put a maybe by it. This is getting to be a very long list, isn't it? Oh dear. Mrs. Gaskell and Me, I'm going to say yes, that was an incredible book and one that had a really profound effect on me. The Miniaturist was absolutely incredible and I loved a lot. Maurice, also brilliant. Olive, also absolutely bloody brilliant. And The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, also absolutely brilliant. The last two books on my favourite list from 2018 are absolutely incredible novels that, as of what I consider now, would definitely be on a, as I said, long list of my favourite books ever. And then, 2019 so far. Obviously, it's only just coming up to halfway through the year, but I had a quick look back through the books that I've read so far this year, and as I read, I keep a list on my computer of the books that I've read, and I put stars by any that I think might end up on my favourite books of the year video at the end of the year, and then I go back to that list and like take out all the ones with stars and see, and often ones that I gave stars in January I no longer feel the same about. So I'm not going to go through all of those books because I feel like I'll have very different thoughts when it comes to my favourite books of 2019, but 6 books that I've read so far this year that currently I would say belong on my favourite books of all time would be Emma's Ice Sandwich by Meiko Kawakami, Affinity by Sarah Waters, The Wonder by Emma Donoghue, Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and The Bedlam Stacks by Natasha Pulley. So that's a lot of books. I'm gonna have a look and try and make a list and work out how many books I have declared to be on my list of the favourite books that I've read in the last 4.5 years. Let's see. So I've just done that, not including the maybes, only including the ones I said would be on that list, and I've got to 37 books, which is quite a lot of books. So I'm going to try and trim that down and come up with like a list, a proper list of my favourite 20 books that I've read in the last few years, and we'll see how that goes. So having been through the list of those 37, I have got it down to 20 in order that I think are probably my favourite books from the last 4.5 years. I feel like some of it's arbitrary and in 2 years' time I might say differently, and also I was kind of judging like one book by one author against another, so I think there's only one author who appears twice on this list because of that. At number 20 I have Reservoir 13 by John McGregor. This is a brilliant novel that looks at the life of a particular small town after a young girl disappears from it and the influence that has on everyone who lives there. It is fantastic. I love John McGregor a lot and I would highly recommend it. At number 19 here is Radiance by Catherine M. Valente. This is a brilliant book which is set in an alternate version of the 20th century where Hollywood is on the moon, and it is told mostly through films, transcripts and diary entries. It is weird and wacky and wonderful and absolutely beautiful. At number 18, this is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This looks at a young woman in 17th century Amsterdam who marries a man and finds herself in a household she doesn't really know where slightly strange things are happening. It is brilliant and twisty and turny and looks really interestingly at social issues in 17th century Holland. At number 17 I have Mrs. Gaskell and Me by Nell Stevens. This is a weird and wonderful book which is sort of part memoir, part novel, part historical biography, which looks at a woman in the 21st century and her relationship with a man called Max, and as she's having this relationship she's also looking back on Elizabeth Gaskell, the author, and writing about her life for her PhD. It's quite weird and quite wonderful and it made me cry a lot. At number 16 I have Maurice by Ian Forster, another novel that made me cry a lot. This novel was written in sort of 1912 to 1913 I think, but it wasn't published until 1970 after Ian Forster's death because it is one of his only novels in which the main character is gay. Ian Forster himself was gay and wrote partly from experience, as he talks about in the kind of afterword which he wrote to this book, although that wasn't published also again until after he had died. And this follows a young man called Maurice in Edwardian England kind of coming to terms with his sexuality. It is beautiful and wonderful and I would highly recommend it. At number 15 we have The Half-Sisters by Geraldine Dewsbury. This is a wonderful Victorian novel which follows 2 half-sisters, one of whom is working class and one of whom is like more middle class, and it's all about respectability and friendship and love in the Victorian period. It is incredible. At number 14 we have Emerald City by Jennifer Egan. This is her short story collection that is absolutely wonderful. Every story in here like moved me incredibly. It's beautifully written. She writes about grief and family and love, and she's just a wonderful writer, and this is definitely my favourite thing by her. At number 13 I have The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy. This is one of my favourite Thomas Hardy novels, and it looks at marriage and society in the Victorian period and the mistakes that people can make and the complexities of love and class and respectability, and it's just a wonderful book, and the setting is really interesting as well. At number 12 I have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, who is actually the only author who appears twice on this list. Station 11 is a wonderful, wonderful book. It is set before, during and after an epidemic that wipes out a lot of the human race, and it follows various characters weaving all of their plot lines together, and I just love it an awful lot. It's brilliantly written and such a fantastic book. At At number 11, I have A Dark Night's Work by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a really brilliant Elizabeth Gaskell novella which follows a young woman and her father and her romantic relationships, and basically what happens when one night something goes wrong which affects her life forever. It's really gripping and twisty and turny, and I cannot recommend it enough. At number 10, I have Smoked Meat by Rowena MacDonald. This is a brilliant short story collection set in Montreal, and it is full of interconnected short stories following various people, many of which are kind of involved in working in cafes or as being like artists or artist models. And basically all of the stories are kind of linked through one or two characters, and it's beautiful and powerful, and I just love it so much. At number 9, I have Lady Susan by Jane Austen. This is a novella by her which is published after her death. It is written in letter forms and is a little bit like an older version of Caroline Bingley messing with everyone around her. Lady Susan is not what you would expect from a Jane Austen heroine. She is very manipulative, very selfish, but also you kind of get why she is as she is because she is a woman at this particular time. It's a brilliant, brilliant novella, so funny, and one I would highly recommend. At number 8, I have Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield, which I read a month or two ago. This is a brilliant novel. Diane Setterfield is one of my favourite writers, and this follows what happens when one evening into a Victorian inn crash a man and a little girl. The little girl appears to be dead. Everyone is certain that she is dead until suddenly she opens her eyes, and it follows how this incident and this little girl kind of affect the whole neighbourhood up and down the Thames. It's brilliantly written, the characters are amazing, and I just loved it a lot. At number 7, I have The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is another book that I read this year, which I absolutely adored. It is amazing. It's set in Victorian Ireland. It follows a nurse called Lib, who is commissioned to watch over a small child who claims that she has not been eating and that she has not eaten or drunken anything for months, and Lib kind of has to work out what's going on. It's such a fantastic book. Brilliantly written, so compelling, and just amazing. At number 6, I have The Odd Women by George Gissing. This is one of my favourite Victorian novels, and it looks at women in Victorian society who don't fit into the conventions of Victorian society, who are not married but want to pursue careers, and it is Victorian feminism at its best, an incredible, incredible read. At number 5, I have The Lola Quartet by Emily St John Mandel. This is my favourite Emily St John Mandel novel and one of my favourite books of all time. It is incredible and beautiful and wonderful. It follows a man who, during the recession in 2012, discovers that he may have had a child that he never knew about 10 years ago when he was leaving high school, and then he starts to look back on his life and this particular jazz quartet he was in at high school and kind of what happened then in comparison to his life now, and he like rediscovers all of these people. It's just amazing. It's beautiful. I love a looking back book. I love a book about music, and it's just, I love Emily St John Mandel a lot. At number 4, I have Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. This is a fantastic, fantastic little collection of 2 short stories slash a novella and a short story. Kitchen is a story about food and grief and love, and Moonlight Shadow, the other story in this book, is also about grief and food and love. 2 very amazing stories, and I would highly recommend Banana Yoshimoto. At number 3, I have Olive by Diana Mullet-Craik, a Victorian novel I read in Victober last year, which absolutely blew me away. It follows the life of a woman called Olive. She is born with some kind of deformity in her spine, which means she doesn't look like everyone around her, and society therefore often treats her differently. But the book looks at her like efforts to make a career and a life for herself, her family and her friendships and her religion, and it's just absolutely amazing. If you like Jane Eyre, I think you'd like Olive, but it has a lot of different twists on it too, and it's just an amazing book. At number 2, I have The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley, a wonderful book which was my favourite book of last year, and it follows a man called Nathaniel and what happens when he encounters a watchmaker who kind of changes his life forever. It's set in the Victorian period, but it also has a little bit of Japanese culture, a little bit of clockwork, a little bit of magic, and a little bit of music, which is basically all I need to make a book that I'm gonna love. But number 1, I think my favourite book from the last 4.5 years has got to be The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. I love this book a lot, and it's definitely an all-time favourite for me, and definitely like a lot of my favourite novels from the Victorian period are books that I've read in my teens, which I've reread since. But this book, along with Olive and The Odd Women, are books that I've read as an adult for the first time and have just like completely captivated me and reminded me all the things I love about Victorian literature. The Small House at Allington follows 2 sisters and their various like relationships and life decisions. They live in the small house at Allington. Their uncle owns the big house and is quite wealthy, and it looks at Lily and Belle and the men around them, especially one man called Johnny Eames, who I love a lot and who often makes mistakes but you also understand. And the ending of this book is just magnificent, and I loved it a lot. The whole book is amazing, but the ending is just, it's perfect. is perfect. So there we have it. I imagine this is going to be a very, very long video. I think I've been filming for about an hour, but like I said, I really enjoyed watching these on other people's channels, so I hope you will have gotten something out of it. And I think that is finally all for now. Please let me know down in the comments what your favourite book is in a particular year, has changed over time, and how your feelings about particular books have changed since you've read them, because I find it's really interesting to see how certain books stay with you and certain books don't as much. And I think that is all. Thank you so much for watching this very long video, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.